Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. On the night of August 5, 2002, the quiet town of Troop, Texas, was settling in for another peaceful evening. Porch lights flickered, families rested, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But inside the parsonage of the local Methodist church, something terrible was happening. A frantic knock on a neighbor's door broke the silence. Standing there was Pastor Mike Tabb, holding his two young children, his face pale and his hands shaking. He was out of breath, his voice urgent. Something was very wrong. Minutes later, police arrived at the scene. What they found inside the house stunned even the most experienced officers. The bedroom was in chaos. Broken picture frames, overturned furniture, and signs of a struggle everywhere. And in the middle of it all lay Marla Tabb, motionless on the floor. At first, it seemed like a home invasion gone wrong, but as investigators looked closer, things didn't add up. The loving wife, the respected pastor, the peaceful town, none of it fit with what had just happened. So what really went on that night? And who was responsible? Marla Tabb was born on April the 25th, 1967, in Beaumont, Texas. She was one of two daughters born to Jim and his wife, whose name remains unknown. As was common in those times, her mother lovingly took care of the children and managed the household, while Jim, fulfilling his role as a devoted father, worked hard to provide financial stability for the family. Their daughters, Melanie and Marla, grew up in a home filled with music and the arts, which played a significant role in shaping their interests. From an early age, Marla displayed a deep passion for music and was eager to develop her talents. By the age of 11, she had fully embraced her Christian faith, becoming actively involved in the Methodist Church. She dedicated herself to the church's social outreach programs, spreading God's message to different communities and encouraging people to strengthen their connection with the faith. It was during this time that her exceptional voice began to gain recognition. Accompanied by either a piano or a guitar, her singing touched the hearts of many. Beyond her talent, Marla possessed striking beauty and a charismatic personality that left a lasting impression on everyone who met her. Friends described her as kind-hearted and principled, someone who formed strong bonds and maintained them despite time and distance. She was deeply respected and never found herself in troublesome company or situations. Recognizing her passion, her supportive parents encouraged her to pursue formal music education. They enrolled her in a prestigious private university in Texas, where she flourished, gaining a deeper understanding of her craft. Marla remained devoted to her faith, using her musical gifts to serve the church. She eventually became the director of music and youth ministry, leading worship with her powerful soprano voice. For 3 seasons, she played a key role in organizing the church's musical productions across Texas. Raised in a household where faith guided every aspect of life, Marla had always dreamed of building a family of her own, one rooted in love and devotion to God. This dream started to take shape when she met Mike Tabb. Mike was born in Texas on July 7, 1961, to Eleanor and Harold Tabb. He grew up alongside his two brothers, Jeff and Danny, in a family that was deeply committed to the Methodist Church. When Mike decided to dedicate his life to ministry, his family saw it as a true blessing. After completing his studies at a Methodist Christian school, Mike was assigned as a chaplain at a military camp in North Carolina. Meanwhile, Marla continued to serve actively in her church. Their paths crossed often. She led the worship music, and he delivered the sermons. Over time, a strong friendship blossomed, built on mutual admiration and shared faith. This connection soon deepened into a loving and respectful relationship. As their love grew, Mike knew he wanted to spend his life with Marla. A few months into their courtship, he visited her parents to formally ask for her hand in marriage. With their blessing, he presented Marla with an engagement ring, marking the beginning of their journey toward marriage. In 1998, they exchanged vows in a Methodist church, pledging to love, respect, and support each other in all circumstances, always guided by their faith. At 31 and 37 years old, respectively, Marla and Mike started their married life together, settling at the military camp where Mike continued his pastoral duties. Mike quickly gained a reputation as a powerful preacher, capable of moving even the most skeptical hearts. His sermons had an undeniable impact, inspiring people to turn to God. Many viewed him as a devoted disciple of Christ, committed to spreading the gospel. Marla, now known as Marla Tabb, became his steadfast partner in ministry. Aware of the responsibilities that came with this role, she dedicated herself wholeheartedly to supporting him and their mission. 2 years into their marriage, Marla received the joyful news that she was expecting their first child. On April 25, 2000, they welcomed a baby boy named Jonathan. His arrival brought immense happiness, and Marla devoted herself to raising him, while Mike continued his work as a minister. However, as Mike's reputation as a preacher grew, so did the demands on his time. He was frequently invited to speak at churches across the country, leading to extended absences from home. Marla, now a young mother, found it increasingly difficult to cope with his constant travels. She longed for his presence, feeling the strain of raising their child largely on her own. Their once unshakable harmony began to face its first true challenge. Despite her husband's frequent absences, Marla found some comfort in the security of the military camp, where she had built strong friendships and enjoyed a supportive environment. However, during this time, she suffered a heartbreaking loss. She became pregnant again, but miscarried shortly after. Juggling the demands of motherhood with the emotional toll of a failed pregnancy, Marla found it increasingly difficult to cope with Mike's prolonged absences. Their relationship became strained as disagreements escalated. While she longed for him to be more present, Mike insisted that his commitments required frequent travel. Despite their struggles, the couple attempted to mend their relationship, and by 2002, things seemed to be improving when Marla announced she was expecting another child. This news temporarily brought a sense of peace to their home, but their relief was short-lived. Unexpectedly, Mike received news that he was being discharged from military service and reassigned to a civilian Methodist church. With little time to process the sudden change, he was transferred to Troop, a small agricultural town in Texas with a population of just 1,900. The timing could not have been worse. Marla was nearing the end of her pregnancy, already caring for their 2-year-old son, and now faced an abrupt move. Despite her reluctance, the transition had to be made quickly. The arrival of the new pastor and his family was a major event for the tight-knit community. Aware of Marla's advanced pregnancy, the women of the church took it upon themselves to prepare the parsonage for the family's arrival. However, overwhelmed by the recent upheaval, Marla struggled to adjust. She did not express gratitude in the way the congregation expected, which led to whispers about her being distant and unapproachable. Adjusting to civilian life proved to be a significant challenge. The shift from the structure of military ministry to a small-town congregation, coupled with financial uncertainties and the stress of their growing family, put additional strain on their marriage. Both Marla and Mike felt the pressure of being scrutinized by the congregation, whose members closely observed their every move. As tensions mounted, Marla found herself the subject of town gossip. One particular incident cemented her reputation among the townspeople. In a moment of frustration, she publicly confronted Mike, which was seen as a sign of disrespect. In this conservative rural community, where traditional gender roles were deeply ingrained, Marla's assertiveness was viewed as unacceptable. From that moment, many labeled her as a domineering wife who mistreated her husband. Marla, increasingly unhappy, began to confide in trusted friends and family about her struggles. She questioned whether the life she was living bore any resemblance to the Christian home she had once dreamed of. The stress took a toll on her health, and when labor complications arose, she was rushed to the hospital for an emergency C-section. On July 25, 2002, she gave birth to a baby boy. Jonathan, now 2 years old, was thrilled to have a little brother to look after. Marla took time to recover, and once she regained her strength, she attempted to reconnect with the community and resume her role as the pastor's wife. However, she never fully adapted to her new surroundings. The difficulties of the past months had left deep scars, and the strain in her marriage continued to grow, affecting the atmosphere at home. Like any couple facing hardships, they could have worked through their differences or chosen an amicable separation. However, what happened next shattered any possibility of resolution in the most tragic way imaginable. On the night of August 5, 2002, the police received a frantic 911 call, redirected from emergency dispatch. The caller was a neighbor of the Tabb family, who reported that Pastor Mike had arrived at their doorstep in distress, carrying his 2 young children and begging for help. His wife had been brutally attacked and was unresponsive. Emergency responders, including sheriff's deputies and firefighters, rushed to the parsonage. The scene that awaited them was devastating. Marla, just 6 weeks postpartum, had been found in her bedroom, still dressed in her nightclothes. Even the most seasoned officers were shaken by the brutality of what they saw. The crime scene was in complete disarray. Broken picture frames, overturned furniture, and scattered belongings indicated a violent struggle. Investigators immediately began gathering evidence while others questioned Mike about the events of that evening. He claimed that he had just arrived home, only to find the front door open and his wife lying motionless on the floor. Checking for a pulse and finding none, he had rushed to the children's room, grabbed both boys, and fled to the neighbor's house for help. Marla's body was transported to the morgue for autopsy. Initial observations were grim. Her face was severely disfigured, and her jaw was fractured. A forceful blow to the head appeared to have been the fatal injury. As investigators worked to determine the murder weapon, one comment from Mike stood out. Without being prompted, he speculated that his wife had been attacked with a baseball bat, a detail that raised immediate suspicion, as the authorities had not yet determined the cause of death. Detectives pursued various leads, initially considering the possibility of a home invasion gone wrong. However, this theory was quickly dismissed, as nothing of value was missing from the home. Another possibility emerged: a crime of passion. With no clear suspect, investigators remained open to all possibilities. That night, Mike was asked to take his children somewhere safe, and they were temporarily placed in the care of their paternal grandparents. Law enforcement then requested his clothing and shoes for examination and questioned him about his whereabouts earlier that evening. He stated that he had taken his 2-year-old son to his parents' house, a claim they later confirmed. In a town where violent crime was nearly unheard of, the last recorded homicide had been 5 years earlier, news of Marla's brutal death spread rapidly. The entire community was horrified by the nature of the attack, and many sympathized with Mike, who now faced raising 2 small children alone. When the preliminary autopsy report was released, it confirmed that Marla had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Her jaw had been fractured in multiple places, further indicating the extreme violence of the attack. Marla's funeral was held in an intimate ceremony where a fellow minister spoke about her unwavering faith and dedication to God. Though her death was a profound loss for those who loved her, the sermon framed it as a transition to eternal peace. Throughout the services, Mike was visibly grief-stricken, his sorrow deeply moving those in attendance. Meanwhile, investigators continued speaking with those close to Marla, hoping to uncover any clues that might shed light on the case. A breakthrough came when they interviewed Melanie. Fighting back tears, she revealed that her sister had confided in her just weeks before her death, expressing deep distress over her crumbling marriage. Marla had stumbled upon something unexpected, a promotional flyer for an exotic dance club tucked into the pocket of Mike's pants. When she confronted him, he claimed it belonged to a congregation member he had been counseling. But Marla wasn't convinced. As she dug deeper, she discovered a troubling pattern. The church-related trips Mike frequently took were not for ministry work, as he had claimed, but rather opportunities to indulge in a secret life that contradicted everything he preached. Investigators followed this lead and uncovered 2 separate P.O. boxes, one in Troup and another in North Carolina, where the couple had previously lived. These hidden mailboxes had allowed Mike to keep his double life concealed from his family. Determined to gather concrete evidence supporting their theory that Marla had been killed because she intended to divorce Mike and expose his deception, authorities placed him under covert surveillance. They suspected he would soon reveal his true nature, and they were right. Mike was frequently seen visiting illicit establishments, including escort services and strip clubs, where he often drank heavily. Just days after Marla's funeral, he was spotted entering an exclusive club known for catering to high-profile clientele. Investigators pressed on with their inquiries, leading to the discovery of what they believed to be the murder weapon. While the crime scene had been meticulously cleaned, one crucial detail had been overlooked: a large wooden table, missing one of its legs. Forensic tests using luminol revealed traces of Marla's blood inside the trunk of Mike's vehicle, as well as on his shoes, including the laces. With this irrefutable evidence in hand, law enforcement worked swiftly with the district attorney's office to secure an arrest warrant. On August 8, 2002, the quiet town of Troup was shaken once again when news broke that their respected Methodist pastor had been arrested as the prime suspect in his wife's murder. However, his time behind bars was brief. He was released the same day after posting a $50,000 bail. Mike's legal team had already begun negotiations with the court, arranging for his preliminary hearing to take place in mid-August. A plea deal was in the works that would allow him to avoid a lengthy trial in exchange for a 50-year prison sentence. But when the hearing date arrived, Mike was nowhere to be found. Authorities soon discovered he had attempted to take his own life. His defense attorneys claimed he was hospitalized, but prosecutors argued that this was an attempt to escape justice and demanded additional penalties. According to his family, Mike had been staying at his parents' house in the days leading up to the hearing. One afternoon, he went for a walk and never returned. Concerned, his family alerted authorities, who launched a search. He was found near a lake with a self-inflicted stab wound. The injury was severe enough to require immediate surgery, which lasted nearly 3 hours. During the investigation, A witness came forward, stating they had seen Mike hiding behind a tree and throwing an object into the water. A team of divers was deployed, and after searching the murky depths, they recovered a knife believed to have been used in the attempt on his own life. Given these events, prosecutors sought to extend his prison sentence from 50 to 55 years, while a judge increased his bail to $1 million. On September 29, 2003, Mike appeared before the district court, showing no visible emotion as he formally accepted the prosecution's plea deal. His defense attorney told reporters that they had chosen to avoid a full trial, as it would bring to light painful details that neither Marla's nor Mike's family wanted exposed. The attorney acknowledged that Mike had taken Marla's life, but suggested that the exact motive would remain unknown. He claimed that Mike's primary concern was protecting his children from ever hearing the grim details of their mother's death. However, that hope proved futile. The case had drawn widespread media attention, and the tragic circumstances surrounding Marla's murder became impossible to keep hidden. Before the judge delivered the final sentence, Melanie took the stand to deliver a victim impact statement on behalf of the family. Her voice trembled with emotion as she addressed Mike directly, reminding him that he had orphaned his own children. She demanded that he take responsibility, to stand before the court and admit that it was his own hands that had stolen their mother from them. The judge then issued the final ruling. Mike Tabb was sentenced to 55 years in prison for the murder of Marla Tabb. Prosecutors clarified that under Texas law, he would not be eligible for parole until he had served at least 27.5 years behind bars. Throughout the proceedings, Mike remained silent and emotionless. Reports later surfaced that he had attempted to end his life multiple times while incarcerated. Despite receiving psychological treatment, his internal torment never subsided. Analysts speculated that the immense guilt weighed heavily on him, perhaps a lingering consequence of his past as a preacher who once stood before a congregation, preaching about morality and faith. The final piece of information uncovered during this investigation revealed that Mike ultimately served only 20 years of his sentence. He died in 2023. His name was inscribed on a headstone in a Texas cemetery with no mention of his date of death. No official statement was released regarding the cause. Ironically, his family listed Marla as his spouse in his memorial records. His tombstone bore the epitaph, "Loving Son." Perhaps Mike truly had been a devoted son, known for his affection toward his parents. But in the end, his selfishness and hidden desires robbed his kids of a father they could admire. More tragically, he deprived Marla of the chance to see her sons grow into men, a future she had once envisioned as a faithful wife and mother, now stolen by the very person who had vowed to love and protect her. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. It was a cold, quiet night, but something terrifying was about to happen deep in the woods near Altrincham. A car pulled over on the empty road. The driver, a 19-year-old, stepped out looking around nervously. In the passenger seat was Alex, just 15, completely unaware that this night would change everything. What started as a secret between them had spiraled into something dangerous. Trust was broken, emotions were out of control, and within minutes, things would take a deadly turn. But how did it get to this point? And what really happened that night? Stay with me as we uncover the shocking truth behind this chilling case. The Rada family lived a peaceful life in the village of Tabley, nestled in Cheshire, a county in northeastern England. Their home was filled with warmth, shared by Lisa, her husband Adam, and their only child at the time, Adam Jr. For years they had dreamed of expanding their family, but it wasn't until nearly a decade later that their wish finally came true, an event Lisa described as nothing short of a miracle. On March 5, 2004, their second son, Alexander Rhoda, was born. From the start, he was affectionately called Alex. As he grew, Lisa noticed that Alex had unique interests that set him apart from other children. He loved playing with her makeup and handbags, showing a natural inclination towards things that were considered more delicate. At 13, Alex gathered the courage to share a deeply personal truth with his parents. He was gay. Lisa and Adam had long suspected this and welcomed his revelation with open arms, offering unwavering support. Adam, however, did feel concerned, not about Alex's identity, but about how society might treat him. Unfortunately, his fears weren't unfounded. At school, Alex faced taunts from certain classmates, particularly from boys who struggled to accept those who didn't conform to their expectations. Yet Alex remained composed. Unlike many his age, he never felt the need to hide who he was. At Holmes Chapel Secondary School, Alex built a close circle of friends, mostly girls. At least 8 of them were his best friends. They adored him and embraced him wholeheartedly. These friendships became his shield as his friends stood up for him whenever he faced unkind words. With their support, Alex thrived, refusing to let negativity weigh him down. Full of joy, confidence, and enthusiasm for life, Alex was known for his infectious laughter. A bright student, he was also deeply engaged with social media. He loved sharing moments of his life, singing, dancing, and laughing. One of his social media accounts had already amassed more than 4,000 followers. He and his father shared a uniquely close relationship, one that felt more like a friendship. By the time Alex turned 15, he had become incredibly popular, his phone constantly buzzing with messages from friends and admirers alike. But one particular message, received one evening, stood out from the rest. It was from Matthew Mason, an older boy whose online presence had always carried an air of mystery. Something about it made Alex pause. Matthew, from the nearby town of Allerton, was 19 and the son of a farmer. He had grown up in an affluent and devout household with a sprawling estate worth millions. Every Sunday morning, his family faithfully attended church. In school, Matthew had been known for his calm demeanor, much like Alex. He had also attended Holmes Chapel Secondary before pursuing agricultural engineering. A member of the Young Farmers Organization, he worked part-time as an apprentice mechanic and spent his free time fishing with his father, with whom he was particularly close. At the time, Matthew was also in a relationship with a girl named Caitlin Lancashire. In October 2019, Alex confided in Georgia, one of his closest friends, about the messages he had been receiving from Matthew. Georgia was taken aback. She had known Matthew from school and had never noticed him showing the slightest interest in men, nor had he ever hinted at being bisexual. The situation felt odd, even unsettling. Their worlds were entirely different. Alex and Matthew had never run in the same social circles. Without social media, their paths might never have crossed. Georgia cautioned Alex to be careful. Yet, as the messages continued, Alex couldn't help but feel excited. He added Matthew as a friend on one of his social media pages, and soon, their conversations became more frequent. For Alex, this felt like the beginning of something special, his first experience with love. Alex had never been in a relationship before, and the experience felt exhilarating, like stepping into a completely new world. His friends were thrilled when they learned he was finally exploring deep emotions. At first, the exchanges between Alex and Matthew were harmless, just casual messages. But over time, their conversations became more flirtatious, turning into something more intimate. Matthew complimented Alex on his appearance, and soon they started sharing photos. One night, after having too many drinks at a bar, the 19-year-old made a reckless decision. He sent Alex an explicit photo of himself. According to Alex's friends, he had a habit of not fully grasping the seriousness of situations, often treating them as jokes. So, to some extent, he perceived it as part of a flirtatious game. However, things escalated when Matthew sent a video of himself in a compromising act. As their virtual relationship intensified, Matthew suggested they meet in person, offering to pick Alex up from his house. But Alex refused, explaining that his father wouldn't allow it. Still, they continued exchanging hundreds of messages. Curious to learn more about Matthew, Alex decided to dig deeper into his social media accounts. What he found left him feeling betrayed. Matthew was already in a relationship. The realization sparked a wave of frustration and distrust, making him question everything they had shared. Determined to confront the truth, Alex reached out to Matthew's girlfriend, Caitlin, the same girl featured in multiple posts on his social media. On November 3rd, the 15-year-old messaged Caitlin asking if she was dating Matthew. When she confirmed it, he dropped the bombshell, revealing that he had been involved with Matthew in a secret relationship for the past 2 to 3 weeks. Caitlin was left in shock. Alex didn't hold back. He detailed the explicit exchanges between him and Matthew, even mentioning a conversation where he had tried to set boundaries. He admitted that he had only discovered Matthew's relationship after following him. According to media reports, jealousy played a major role in Alex's actions. An hour after speaking with Caitlin, he confronted Matthew, telling him he had exposed the truth to his girlfriend. His anger and frustration were clear. He accused Matthew of deception, not only towards Caitlin but also towards him. "You have someone who loves you," Alex messaged, "so why did you need to talk to me at all?" He insisted that Matthew come clean because, after 2 years together, Caitlin deserved honesty. However, Alex had already taken it upon himself to reveal the truth. Matthew, coming from a deeply religious and traditional family, was terrified of his secrets being made public. His biggest fear was that Alex would expose him. Panicked, he spoke to Caitlin, denying the accusations and painting Alex as a liar. From that moment, the dynamic between Alex and Matthew took a disturbing turn. Feeling cornered, the 15-year-old threatened to leak the explicit photo he still had of Matthew. According to reports, later that same day, Matthew added Alex as a beneficiary to his bank account and transferred him just over $60. By then, Caitlin had already ended the relationship. Despite the tension between them, on November 9th, Alex and Matthew met in person for the first time and became physically involved. Over the following 2 weeks, their secret relationship continued, and although everything seemed fine on the surface, the payments didn't stop. Matthew wasn't ready for the truth to come out. But on December 12th, 2019, everything reached a breaking point. After weeks of threats and pressure, Matthew snapped. That cold, rainy night, he picked Alex up from his house and drove him to a secluded forested area near Altrincum under the pretense of having another intimate encounter. But once they arrived, Matthew unleashed his rage, attacking Alex mercilessly with a wrench he had brought with him. After carrying out the brutal act, Matthew drove to a friend's farm, hoping to eliminate any evidence that could tie him to the crime. As part of his alibi, he then calmly made his way to two different bars, meeting up with friends for drinks as if nothing had happened. At one of the bars, he took a selfie and posted it on social media, further solidifying his pretense of a normal night out. Later, in an attempt to make his alibi even more convincing, he snapped a picture of himself lying in bed, smiling with his bare torso exposed. He later sent this image to Caitlin. Sometime during the night, he found Alex's phone lying on the passenger seat of his car. Knowing how much incriminating evidence was stored on the device, he quickly got rid of it. As the night deepened, Matthew made a chilling return to the forest. He dragged Alex's lifeless body to the side of the road and tried to lift him into his Renault Clio. But after several failed attempts, he gave up and left the body abandoned there, walking away without looking back. By this time, Alex's parents were growing increasingly anxious about his disappearance. After failing to reach him, they reported him missing, and soon, police, friends, and family members were desperately searching for him. At exactly 12:35 a.m., a Cheshire police officer sent Matthew a text message asking him to get in touch regarding his missing friend, Alex. It was Alex's mother who first voiced her suspicions about the 19-year-old. By morning, the grim reality unfolded. A group of garbage collectors made a gruesome discovery: Alex's half-naked body, severely disfigured from multiple blows. When law enforcement arrived at the crime scene in the forest, they were met with a horrifying sight. Alex had suffered at least 15 blows to the head in what authorities described as a savage and merciless attack. Matthew never anticipated being caught so quickly. However, a witness had unknowingly sealed his fate. The previous night, someone had taken a photo of a vehicle parked by the roadside. When police traced it back, they confirmed it belonged to Matthew. On December 13th, just before noon, officers arrested him on a nearby highway. Despite his attempt to wash away the evidence, dried blood was still visible on his hands. A search of his car's trunk uncovered a garbage bag containing damning evidence: a green sweater stained with blood, the very wrench used to attack Alex, and a large padded jacket that had belonged to the victim. With overwhelming evidence against him, Matthew was taken into custody and formally charged with the crime. Investigators pieced together the tragic trajectory of Alex and Matthew's relationship, revealing how it had started with intrigue and ended in unimaginable violence. Their digital exchanges had frequently revolved around money, leading to a final, fateful conversation just moments before Alex's brutal murder. Records showed that after the first payment, Matthew had sent Alex a total of $2,500, allegedly as payment for their encounters and to ensure his silence. The last transfer, amounting to $130, was made just 5 days before the crime. Adding another layer to the tragedy, it was revealed that shortly before his death, Alex had an unsettling encounter with Matthew's mother. She had unexpectedly walked in on them during an intimate moment. Disturbed by what had happened, Alex later messaged a friend, confiding his discomfort and even detailing the physical pain he felt after the incident. In a joking manner, his friend teased him, calling him a prostitute, to which Alex simply responded by repeatedly mentioning money. As the investigation deepened, chilling new details emerged. Matthew's internet search history exposed his dark thoughts. He had researched ways to end someone's life. Among his disturbing queries were, what happens if you push someone down the stairs? As well as searches on poisons and unsolved missing person cases in Cheshire. According to one of Alex's friends, when Matthew initially reached out to arrange their final meeting, Alex had been excited. However, after a second phone call, he began to feel uneasy. He even messaged his friend, asking if it seemed strange that the meetup was in a special secret place. By then, Alex had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. Despite his doubts, he eventually agreed to go, most likely because he needed the money. Moments after getting into Matthew's car, Alex posted one last image on his social media story. It was a simple shot of the car's interior, with a small heart emoji at the bottom. That was the final message he ever sent. Alex's closest friends, who often spoke with him about his new relationship, began to grow increasingly worried as time passed, especially when he kept asking for more money. At one point, Matthew told him that he was struggling financially and could no longer afford to send him anything. However, not long after, he transferred around $800. Alex's friends, whose identities were protected for legal reasons, later told the police that they were fully aware that what he was doing was wrong and had voiced their concerns to him. Despite their warnings, Alex chose to continue down the same path. The trial began on January 25, 2021. At Chester Crown Court, the jury heard that the two had only known each other for a few months but had been engaged in a secret and illegal relationship during that time. According to English law, a relationship between a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old is considered unlawful, as the age of consent is 16. This means that any sexual activity involving a minor, regardless of their willingness, is strictly prohibited. In his testimony before the judge, Matthew admitted to striking Alex with a wrench but attempted to justify his actions, claiming that he had lost control after being blackmailed by the teenager. According to his version of events, he and Alex had first started talking in October 2019 through casual conversations. However, as time went on, Alex allegedly began sending him late-night messages, asking personal and suggestive questions, such as whether he was wearing any clothes. Matthew further claimed that Alex had tried to attack him before his death. He also stated that he had run out of money and had lost friends and family due to the situation. Though he never explicitly stated what the payments were for, he maintained that he was under significant pressure. Additionally, he told the court that he felt ashamed and deeply unsettled after being intimate with Alex. At some point, he said, he realized that what he was doing was wrong, not only because Alex was male, but also because of his age. During the trial, prosecutors presented the full details of Alex's conversations with Caitlin, who had been Matthew's girlfriend at the time. One of the detectives strongly refuted Matthew's claim that the murder was an act of impulse. Instead, he argued that Matthew had deliberately planned the attack. He had lured Alex to an isolated location, believing that no one would find out what he was about to do. During the victim impact statements, Alex's parents, Adam and Lisa, paid an emotional tribute to their son, describing him as a beautiful and loving boy. Lisa spoke through tears, saying that losing a child in such a horrific and brutal way was nothing short of living through hell. She emphasized that Alex had been raised in love, not fear, and had always been proud of who he was. He never had to hide behind a mask or pretend to be someone he wasn't. She condemned Matthew's actions, pointing out that although he had admitted to the crime early in the trial, he still forced their family to endure unnecessary trauma in a desperate attempt to reduce his sentence. According to Lisa, he never once considered the unbearable pain he inflicted on both families. She went on to call him the most selfish, cold, and calculating person she had ever encountered, criticizing his repeated attempts to shift the blame onto Alex and tarnish his name throughout the trial. Adam, on the other hand, remembered his son as a fun-loving, respectful young man who always cared about others' feelings. He admitted that he would never be able to overcome the loss and that their lives would never be the same again. After a trial that lasted a month and more than 9 hours of jury deliberation, the panel rejected Matthew's version of events and found him guilty by a majority verdict of 10-2. As he sat in the defendant's chair, sobbing, the judge delivered the sentencing. Given that he had used a weapon, the mandatory minimum sentence for his crime was set at 25 years. The judge described the killing as a premeditated murder, meticulously planned and executed without mercy. He also noted that while Alex may have initiated contact, it was clear that Matthew not only responded, but actively encouraged a sexual relationship. He pointed out that Matthew was far more experienced and worldly than his victim, who was still young and emotionally immature for his age. Furthermore, he stated that Matthew had carefully orchestrated the situation. While this may not have been his first sexual experience, it was for Alex. The judge concluded that Alex had naively made demands, but those demands stemmed from the sexual offenses committed by Matthew. The responsibility for what transpired did not fall on Alex. In determining the sentence, the judge underscored Matthew's complete lack of empathy and the utter disregard he showed for both the victim and his grieving family. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 28 years before parole eligibility. Despite the severity of the crime, Matthew's legal team filed an appeal against the sentence. On June 23, 2021, after reviewing both written and oral arguments, a panel of 3 appellate judges ruled that the original sentence had been excessively long. They decided to reduce the minimum term from 28 years to 26. Matthew's internal struggle, his inability to accept his own sexuality, and his fear of rejection created an emotional conflict that, when left unresolved, led to unimaginable pain and devastation. In his desperate attempt to escape a reality he refused to face, he destroyed not only his own future, but also the life of someone who embraced his identity without shame or fear.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you.
On April 4, 2014, a panicked 911 call came from a small apartment in Vermont. A mother's voice trembled. Her baby wasn't breathing. Paramedics rushed to the scene, finding 14-month-old Peyton Giroux unresponsive in his crib. His little body was still, his skin cold. The once happy baby, full of smiles, was now gone. Doctors did everything they could, but it was too late. Peyton was pronounced dead at the same hospital where he had been born just over a year earlier. At first, it seemed like a heartbreaking accident, but when doctors took a closer look, something didn't add up. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing truth. What really happened to Peyton that day, and who was responsible? Peyton Giroir came into the world on January 10, 2013, at Fletcher Allen Healthcare in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, Nitosha LaForce, had her boyfriend Joshua Giroir sign the birth certificate even though he wasn't the child's biological father. To this day, the identity of Peyton's real father remains unknown. From the start, Peyton was a baby who brought joy to those around him. With his light brown hair, deep dark eyes, and round, chubby cheeks, he was adored by everyone who met him. He loved wearing baseball caps and bright, cheerful outfits, always lighting up the room with his constant smiles. But behind his happy demeanor, Peyton's life was anything but easy. Born 5 weeks premature, Peyton was exposed to methadone before birth. His mother later admitted to using heroin during the first part of her pregnancy and then switching to methadone in the later months. Despite these challenges, Peyton was described as a sweet and easygoing baby, what some would call a dream baby. Nitosha LaForce was born in 1986 to Craig and Patricia LaForce. Her parents divorced when she was just 5, and both later remarried. As she grew older, she found herself on a troubled path. In 2005, during a heated argument with an acquaintance of her ex-boyfriend, she stabbed the man in the neck. Court records show that this act of violence led to a prison sentence of more than 2 years. By the time Peyton was born, she was still on parole for that crime. Struggling to get by, Nitosha bounced between homeless shelters and cheap motels, relying on welfare for survival. Her relationships were often volatile, marked by addiction and violence. In early 2013, she and Joshua took Peyton to New Hampshire, violating the conditions of her parole. On May 29th of that year, both Nitosha and Joshua were arrested. With no one else to care for him, Peyton was placed with his maternal grandmother. By July 2013, Nitosha was released from jail, and despite her unstable history, the Vermont Department of Children and Families returned Peyton to her. At the time, she was living at the Lund Family Center, a residential program aimed at helping mothers turn their lives around. She seemed to be making progress. She completed parenting courses, though she later admitted she didn't find them helpful. The Vermont Department of Children and Families continued checking in on Peyton until January 2014, but their involvement soon faded. Even though she had regained custody of her son, Nitosha showed little interest in his medical care. The Vermont Department of Children and Families had to push her to keep up with his vaccinations. Once she left the Lund Family Center, she quickly fell back into old patterns. In January 2014, she moved into an apartment on Mallets Bay Avenue in Winooski, Vermont. Within a month, she had entered a new relationship with Tyler Chicoine, a man with a troubling past. His criminal record included charges for assault, robbery, and disorderly conduct, among others. On April 2, 2014, Nitosha and Tyler brought Peyton to the hospital, claiming he had suddenly stopped walking and had been vomiting. Medical staff at Fletcher Allen Healthcare noticed bruises on his neck, 2 circular marks, each about a centimeter wide, in an unusual location for a child to bruise naturally. The couple couldn't provide a clear explanation for how they got there. Despite these concerning injuries, doctors missed something even more alarming. Peyton had a broken leg. Still, he was released back into Nitosha's care. The hospital did, however, file a report with Child Services. Soon after, investigators uncovered a text message Nitosha had sent to Tyler's sister. It read, "The hospital called the Vermont Department of Children and Families about those bruises on his neck and are coming to my house tomorrow at 1 p.m. So I don't want to look like I don't have much food and stuff." On April 4th, 2014, John Salter, a seasoned investigator with 25 years of experience, visited Nitosha's home twice. On his first visit, he was told Peyton was sleeping. When he returned later that day, Nitosha briefly showed him the child's bruises, but the room was dimly lit. Salter never physically examined Peyton. Later, when questioned by authorities, Salter admitted, "Do I know that he was still alive? No, I don't." Not long after Salter left, Nitosha made a chilling call to 911. Her baby wasn't breathing. Peyton was rushed back to Fletcher Allen Healthcare, but there was nothing doctors could do. He was pronounced dead at just 14 months old. The question remains, what really happened to baby Peyton? The autopsy results painted a grim picture. Peyton had suffered severe trauma consistent with shaken baby syndrome. His tiny body bore multiple injuries, including head trauma, bruising on his forehead and neck, retinal hemorrhages in both eyes, and brain bleeding. Additionally, his lower leg was fractured, a sign of prior abuse that had gone unnoticed. At the time of Peyton's death, Nitosha was undergoing treatment for opioid addiction at the Howard Center. However, according to court records, she had a habit of sneaking home some of her prescribed buprenorphine, an opioid treatment medication, for Tyler. Just days after Peyton's death, both Nitosha and Tyler were arrested on unrelated parole violations. Nitosha's parole was revoked after testing positive for cocaine and marijuana, while Tyler lost his furlough after testing positive for buprenorphine. By May, investigators had officially ruled Peyton's death a homicide and began digging deeper into the circumstances surrounding it. Despite being under scrutiny, both Nitosha and Tyler denied any involvement. Tyler, who initially claimed he loved Peyton, was found with bruises around his eye and neck. His explanations changed repeatedly. First, he said he got hurt while working out. Then he claimed Nitosha accidentally elbowed him. As the investigation progressed, police questioned Tyler multiple times. Eventually, his story cracked. He admitted that on the day Peyton died, he had witnessed Nitosha violently shaking the toddler before slamming his head onto the floor, just an hour before the investigator John Salter's visit. Tyler also noted that Nitosha seemed to be under the influence of an unfamiliar drug at the time. His admission made him the prosecution's key witness against Nitosha. During a court hearing, Tyler's mother and sister sat in silence as he admitted to withholding critical information from law enforcement. Peyton had died on April 4th, yet it wasn't until May that Tyler revealed the full story. He clearly stated and demonstrated that he saw Nitosha violently shake Peyton and slam his head against the floor in the house, the prosecution explained. The medical examiner confirmed that these injuries were the likely cause of death. Court records show that Tyler had spoken to police 4 times before finally telling the truth during his 3rd and 4th interviews, which included a polygraph test. When asked whether Tyler's earlier dishonesty might have cost Peyton his life, prosecutors acknowledged that his false statements had delayed and misdirected the investigation, initially shielding Nitosha from suspicion. As the case moved forward, Tyler prepared to testify against his former girlfriend. He recounted that just before investigator Salter's visit, he had stepped out of the shower to find Nitosha violently shaking Peyton and slamming him to the ground in frustration. According to Tyler, Nitosha snapped, yelling, "He wouldn't shut the fuck up." Shocked, Tyler responded, "He's a fucking baby. What do you mean?" He then pulled Nitosha away from Peyton, briefly held the child, and placed him back in his crib. At the time, he said, Peyton was still breathing. Both Nitosha and Tyler became suspects in the case, but while Tyler passed a polygraph test, Nitosha failed hers. She attempted to shift the blame onto Tyler, even claiming that Peyton didn't like him, a bizarre accusation considering the child was only 14 months old. With each of them pointing fingers at the other, the case initially lacked clarity. However, the prosecution ultimately determined Nitosha was responsible for Peyton's death. On May 28, 2014, she was formally charged with second-degree murder. She pleaded not guilty and was held without bail. If convicted, she faced up to 20 years in prison. Just days after Peyton's tragic death, the legal proceedings against his mother, Nitosha LaForce, were already underway. During her first court appearance, the judge reviewed the charges against her, ensuring she understood her rights. The prosecution immediately filed a motion requesting that Nitosha be held without bail. We believe the evidence clearly establishes probable cause, and given the severity of the charges, we ask the court to hold her without bail, the prosecutor argued. Nitosha's defense attorney pushed for a temporary ruling, allowing time for another attorney to officially file a motion for bail review. However, after considering the probable cause affidavit, the judge determined that the evidence against Nitosha was strong enough to justify an order to hold her without bail. I am issuing the order to detain the defendant without bail, the judge ruled. A hearing will be scheduled upon request from the defense. The prosecution agreed to move forward with setting the hearing. Despite the legal battle ahead, the case against Nitosha was not without its challenges. With limited forensic evidence, and both Nitosha and Tyler pointing fingers at each other, the prosecution faced an uphill battle in securing a conviction. In October 2016, Nitosha reached a plea deal with prosecutors. She pleaded no contest to manslaughter and child cruelty charges, avoiding a trial. As part of the agreement, she was sentenced to a minimum of 6 years and a maximum of 15 years in prison, with credit for time served since 2014. Additionally, she was placed on probation until 2036, with conditions restricting her contact with children under 10 and requiring substance abuse treatment. However, in May 2020, Nitosha was released early due to pandemic-related concerns. She remains a free woman today. Meanwhile, Tyler also faced legal consequences. He pleaded guilty to providing false information to law enforcement, admitting that he had waited weeks before revealing the truth about Peyton's final moments. According to court records, he initially spoke to investigators 4 times, but only began telling the full story during his 3rd and 4th interviews. Tyler described Nitosha as being in an unrecognizable state the day Peyton died. As part of his plea agreement, Tyler was released from prison, where he had been serving time for a separate parole violation. He was also set to be the state's key witness in Nitosha's trial. However, he never had to testify. Nitosha's plea deal rendered his testimony unnecessary. Peyton's funeral was held on April 12, 2014, in Burlington. Mourners were encouraged to wear baseball-style caps and bright spring colors in honor of his favorite things. A few weeks later, on May 25th, friends and family gathered in Burlington's Battery Park for a candlelight vigil. Dozens of supporters released paper lanterns into the sky in Peyton's memory. "We hope he's looking down on us and this makes him happy," said Cassandra Blondin, a family friend who helped organize the vigil. "We don't want another child to go through this." Jonathan Hinton, Peyton's godfather, expressed his sorrow. "I think some changes need to be made at the Child Services Agency. I'm heartbroken, but it's nice to see people coming together to say goodbye. I miss you, little buddy. I love you. Peyton's death raised serious questions about Vermont's Department of Children and Families and whether the system had failed him. Some pointed fingers at the hospital, arguing that doctors had overlooked his broken leg and released him back into his mother's care despite obvious warning signs. Others criticized Vermont's Department of Children and Families for not taking stronger action when concerns about Peyton's safety were first raised. The public outcry led to an internal investigation into Vermont's Department of Children and Families' handling of the case. Governor Peter Shumlin called for reforms, and scrutiny fell on investigator John Salter, who had visited Peyton's home just before his mother called 911. Some wondered, had Peyton already been dead during that visit? Despite the controversy, the county state's attorney's office determined that Salter had followed Vermont's Department of Children and Families protocols, which at the time did not require a physical examination of the child. Prosecutors concluded there was not enough evidence to pursue criminal charges against him. At a press conference, state's attorney defended Salter's actions. He did what he was trained to do. He followed the policies Vermont's Department of Children and Families had in place. However, Peyton's case exposed the flaws in those very policies. Many other states required caseworkers to conduct hands-on checks to confirm a child's well-being, yet Vermont did not. A 27-page report from Vermont State Police detailed Peyton's history with Vermont's Department of Children and Families. Born premature and drug-exposed, he had initially been placed in protective custody before being returned to his mother under supervised conditions at the Lund Family Center. While Natosha had made some progress in parenting programs, she continued to struggle with addiction and instability. Days before his death, medical staff had noted bruises on Peyton's body. Yet under Vermont's Department of Children and Families standards at the time, they did not meet the threshold for documented abuse. A deputy commissioner acknowledged the heartbreaking nature of the case and the need to reassess policies, especially given the increasing challenges posed by opioid addiction and unstable family environments. Lawmakers reevaluated Vermont's child protection laws, and in June 2015, they passed reforms shifting the system's focus from family reunification to prioritizing the safety of children. The legislature also approved additional funding to hire more social workers and administrative staff, aiming to improve oversight and prevent future tragedies. Though Peyton's life was heartbreakingly short, his death left a lasting impact. The failures that led to his passing became a catalyst for long overdue changes in Vermont's child welfare system. While those reforms can never bring Peyton back, they serve as a reminder of the responsibility society has to protect its most vulnerable children.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.